Welcome back to On Record PR, where we discuss the latest news, topics, and insights that matter most to law firm leaders. Hi, Gina.
Hello, Jennifer.
For our regular listeners, hello. And for anyone new, we are your hosts, Jennifer Simpson Carr and Gina Rubel. And we're fresh off of the WIPL conference. For those who may not be familiar, it's the Women Influence and Power in Law conference, which was held in Washington, D.C. this year.
And if you can't see me, I'm holding up my arm and I'm flexing my muscle because we've got power.
Yeah, and I was reminded by many of our friends and colleagues that live in Washington, D.C., that we were actually in National Harbor, Maryland. So
Yes, yes,
they
thank
wanted
you.
to make that distinction. So, Gina, it was clear this year that the legal industry, which I feel like we already knew, but it's in the middle of a massive transformation. Every confirmation, every session, every coffee chat really included one of a few topics: technology, leadership, inclusion. And we kept circling back to one question generally, which is how do we evolve as a profession without losing the human connection that we know so well and that defines, the reason that people choose to work together?
Jen, there were definitely some threads running through the conference, and there were three that were really stood out, all of which also talked about that need for human connection. And one was AI and the emerging tech and how it's outpacing regulators and the regulations that are coming down. Another one was generative AI and how it's transforming client expectations. And the third was regulatory frameworks and how they're tightening. And if I could just for a second elaborate on those. AI and how it's outpacing regulations. The legal leaders are now navigating how to balance innovation with compliance, especially around data privacy, model governance, and client confidentiality. As we all know, but it's a big part of the conversation, with Gen AI and how it's transforming expectations of general counsels, clients now assume first that their law firms can deliver faster insights. They also expect human judgment, empathy, and accountability that we all agree machines can't replicate. So that was a really important theme. And the third that I mentioned in terms of regulatory frameworks and how they're tightening, the big issue is from ESG disclosures to DEI reporting, general counsels, the in-house lawyers are being asked to navigate competing state, federal, and international standards. So that's a really big issue because while from a federal level, we may be saying no to DEI, that doesn't mean states, corporations, or international standards have changed. So that's really what I saw, along with a lot of great camaraderie.
It's some of your points are interesting because I picked up on certain things throughout the conference. And while I feel this might be a little bit dramatic or harsh, an AmLaw 50 partner who was leading a session said, if your firm is not using technology and AI at this point, you're going to die. And again, I thought that was dramatic,
And
but
they
I
didn't
think it,
mean individuals, they meant the
yes, the
firm.
firm.
Right.
Yes, thank you for clarifying. But really, just that perception that things are moving at a fast pace, and the further firms wait to explore or deploy AI, the further they may be behind. But really, what we're going to talk about today is that last point that you mentioned, which is relationships, because in law firms or legal service providers, whether you're leading a practice or industry group, a client team, building a book of business, or, as an in-house professional guiding your corporate team through change, relationships are what makes transformation sustainable. And as we're seeing technology is accelerating, it's very easy for professionals and companies and firms to focus on efficiency. But as we heard over and over again from in-house counsel, the law firms that stand out for them right now are the law firms that pair efficiency with maintaining trust. So AI can process the information, it can expedite the amount of time and efficiency, but people are still responsible for processing context and emotion, and they're also responsible for building and maintaining trust. So Gina, I thought it was fascinating that while everyone was talking about talking about technology, the real differentiator in the conversations was not the tools themselves that firms were using. It was the people and how much clients trust the people who are using it.
Absolutely. And, I spoke to one partner who said that our clients don't hire us anymore for simply answers, they hire us for judgment. And while we're not at the place where we can trust generative AI to give us answers that are correct, we're still, that it's evolving, right? But it's the judgment. It's how do you apply that under the circumstances? And that's built on relationships, understanding the client's business models, their market, their customers, their risk tolerance, and their communication style. So one thing that I took away is that AI cannot replicate that level of trust and empathy. And so that's really where relationship building meets innovation. So the more technology streamlines our work, which it is, right? We use it every day. But that gives us more space to invest in what clients really value, which is that advisory relationship built on credibility and care. And that's no different, Jennifer, than what we do here at Furia Rubel.
Mm-hmm.
So, it also connects to retention, right? It's they're going to retain the firms who give them that personalized attention, who where there are trusted relationships, and not just retention of the client relationships, but then retention of talents like associates, staying where they feel known and supported, and where those strong relationships with a mentor or sponsor can be the difference between them, frankly, staying or going after being a lateral hire.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point because I know that uh, not younger, excuse me, individuals who were earlier in their career, regardless of age, were really interested in firms who were innovative and evolving to meet the times for clients. But the key factor again is our mentors, our partners helping me in my role to evolve with that technology to help secure my understanding, education, and application of these, tools. And that's a commitment firms need to make in order to keep good talent.
And Jen, before you go further on that, I just want to share that in a lot of the programs, people talked about reverse mentorship among younger generations and more senior generations. And that plays in as well. It's not just up to the more senior generations, the more experienced people to mentor or sponsor younger people, but it works both ways. And I learn from you every day, and we're not the same generation. And you and I learn from other members of our team who are millennials. And so that really has to come into play as well. It can't just, associates, for example, can't just expect senior leaders to mentor them.
I think that's a great point. And, part of what we want to talk about today is investing in relationships. And I think, we heard a wonderful keynote speaker the last day, Jenny Wood, who talked about courage. So I would say that, to your point, for anyone more junior in their career, have the courage if you are seeking that mentorship or seeking that opportunity to learn, have the courage to communicate that to people that you're reporting to because it's easy to get frustrated and throw your hands up and maybe look for something different. But part of this relationship building and investing in relationships is having that open and honest communication. Um, so some of the other kind of investing in relationship themes and stories we heard were about mentorship, sponsorship, friendship, and how these relationships have shaped careers. And I I know that that's true for you and me as well. One key takeaway was the importance of intentional networking, not just exchanging contact info or handing someone your business card, connecting on LinkedIn, and that being the extent of relationship building. I'm using air quotes for those of you listening, but actually taking the time to nurture connections that you really feel a strong connection with, even when there's no immediate business reason. So again, going back to the fact that we're in a world of AI and tools like LinkedIn or, even now tapping your iPhones can instantly connect us with each other. It's the differentiator from our perspective is the depth of that connection, not just the broad reach that you have.
Well,
Um,
Jennifer, isn't that, I know that we have members of our team, for example, that you've met through relationship building and that I've met through relationship building. It makes me think of how Kim joined our team.
yeah, that's a great point. Kim Miller, who is an account manager on our team, actually hired me at Sherman and Howard, which is, has now been acquired by Taft, but probably 15 years ago, I reported to her as a member of her team, and we both had children. And I moved back to New Jersey from the Southwest, and we reconnected, when life, allowed us to do so. And fast forward, I mean, probably only a couple of months later, she's now an incredible member of our team for the last 3 years. And I'm so thrilled to have her back in my life. She's an amazing human, but also an amazing team member that brings, diversity of perspective and geography and so much to our team.
Well, and then we have, and that does go on and on. You have Mahalet Ropar, who joined our team most recently, who was a client of ours. And then we have Caitlin McCafferty, who worked here for 6, 8 years. Um, Not good with math, listeners. Never remember the exact amount of years. But now she's a client at a large firm. So it really is about those relationships, and it's also about being discerning and investing deeply in relationships, not because you feel like you're going to get something, but because you think you have something to give. And that's one of the things that I've tried to do my entire career is like when I ask, is there anything I can do for you? I'm actually asking with integrity in mind, not just saying, oh, is there anything I can do for you? And thinking the respondent's going to say nothing. And that's really what helps us to invest in those relationships, teaches us how to handle hard moments. Because when you have a relationship, you could have open dialogue, feedback, disagreement, set boundaries. And I loved one of the phrases during a session that said, clear is kind. And I'm pretty sure that was Jenny Wood, actually. And you mentioned her earlier, and I'm just going to flash her book for people
Mhm.
to see. Wild Courage, Go After What You Want and Get It. I already bought a hardcover. I gave it to my daughter. I'm going to listen to the audio since she has the hardcover. But one of the things that I loved, and this is really applicable to everyone, is learning how to ask for what you want and need. And that goes especially for the younger associates who are trying to figure out next steps, where they want to be in a firm. And also saying that to a client, I would really like to earn more of your business. How can I do that?
Mhm.
So, people don't know what you want unless you ask for it.
So you're very good at clear communication in terms of being very clear, including when there's hard moments. I mean, even yesterday I said, thank you so much for being so clear because I've worked in environments where feedback's really ambiguous and you're kind of not sure when you hang up or you walk out of a room what the direction was. So can you give us an example of that clear as kind?
I can. So if somebody is communicating a message in email, text, Slack, via a Zoom meeting or other virtual meeting, instead of me saying, I need you to communicate better, which starts with an I, which makes it be, all about me. And then you need to, I need you to communicate better. That's an accusation. So it's like pointing, which is for the listeners, I'm actually pointing at my camera.
Mhm.
That doesn't feel good. And it could be something like, for me, it would have been helpful to learn what you discussed during that update last week so that I can be more aligned and support you. Um, so it's not saying I need you to communicate better. It's here's how I could be more successful and how you can support me. So there's none of that. And one of the sessions, Jen, you weren't in, we talked a lot about the use of the words I and you, and when they start a sentence, how it makes other people feel. And Jenny talked about that too during her keynote. So that is a clear way is to say what you need, but don't make someone else feel bad about it. Be a little bit more compassionate and empathetic.
So I always appreciate when you share your personal stories and say, I struggled with this or I learned that the hard way,
Mm.
because it does put it in context for those of us, on the receiving end of that feedback and vice versa. So what we're talking about is actually not something that I do naturally. I've had to work very hard on it. So what is an actionable step for listeners who may struggle with providing clear and kind feedback?
Well, one thing, and Jen, I'm gonna call you out. Um, and first of all, I'm gonna call myself out and say nothing I say is as a result of knowing how to do it without having to learn from my own mistakes. So I think that's really important. And the second thing is, as your cohort in crime, as you will, in what we do, you have always been so kind, and but you always say sorry. And what do I say to you all the time?
Stop saying sorry.
Stop saying sorry, because you're not sorry. You're just being polite. And so, me being direct, this is a great example of being direct. Are you really sorry? No. Then just say, I need to take my child to a doctor's appointment. It takes away the appearance of vulnerability, and you
Mhm.
don't have to be sorry for something you're not sorry for. And that's something that took me a long time to learn. Also, I had an executive coach who taught me that no is a full sentence. And I love that statement. No is a full sentence. So, for example, no, I am not available. You do not have to say why you are not available. And we as women in particular tend to do that all the time. I'm sorry, I'm not available because I have, and we go on and on and on and on, wasting our own time and the listeners rather than say, no, I'm not available. How about the following alternative? So it's kind, it's direct. Um, some people may see it as not having small talk. Frankly, I'm not really great at small talk during the workday. I have a lot of work to do that I like to get done. We have client deadlines. So it's kind and compassionate without making us sound weaker in who we show up as.
So this really brings up the emotional side of leadership, the EQ and your personal emotions and the emotions of others. Um, as technology continues to accelerate, I think that empathy um, becomes even more important because tasks may be going away for individuals. People may feel particularly nervous about impact to their livelihoods. And so it feels to me like people need to feel seen and heard and invited to bring their best ideas forward.
So there are actionable steps for that for our listeners and viewers before any tough conversation. It's, write down, so it's 3 steps. Write down one clear statement of fact, one statement of impact, so fact, impact, and one next step. So would you work through an example with me, Jen, if we were in a role with outside counsel?
Sure.
So in fact, I've noticed your client summaries often focus on legal updates but miss the business implications. What's the impact of that? The impact is clients took us for guidance on what these changes mean for their operations. So we may be missing opportunities to deepen our relationships. And that's what you would do when you have your quarterly check-ins with clients, right?
Mhm.
Client might say, well, we didn't feel completely heard when, or we didn't feel completely aligned when. And then you'll listen, you'll come up with a statement of impact, right? What is the guidance the clients are looking for us, and what opportunities are we missing that so that we can deepen that relationship? And then the next step is the summary. So let's include 2 short bullet points on the client impact, but you would review them with us first. So, hey team, had this conversation with the client. Here are 2 things we can be doing differently that would support the client's expectations. That's the fact, the impact, and the next steps framework, which keeps it clear, kind, and actionable, especially useful in legal environments where precision and tone matter.
So I think that's a great structure and gives people an actionable takeaway to approach a difficult situation with clarity, but also with an idea of how to find a solution that's comfortable for, a next step.
This episode is brought to you by Furia Rubel Communications, a public relations and marketing agency serving law firms and businesses worldwide. With an expert team positioned throughout the U.S. and supported by an international faculty, Furia Rubel enhances our clients' brands through integrated communications by providing expert guidance in crisis management and high-profile litigation, protecting brand and reputation, and supporting internal marketing teams. To learn more, visit furiarubel.com.
So I think we're probably at the end of our time together, and we've provided an actionable takeaway. We will have this um, fact impact next step in our show notes if you'd like to see the example that Gina just ran through. Gina, before we go, are there any other key takeaways from the conference that you think listeners would be interested in learning?
Well, I think it's worth taking time quarterly or monthly or weekly, whatever works for you, to list 3 people you want to reconnect with, a mentor, a peer, or an emerging leader, and schedule time with them, whether it's a coffee talk, if you're fully virtual like us, or even an in-person. Um, schedule a relationship touch point each week, perhaps checking in with a client, a peer, or a mentor. And you don't have to have an agenda. It could just be checking in, and take time to ask a member of your team or client how they're doing. Not just what they're doing. And that how are you is particularly important in times like what we're dealing with right now in the United States, where there's a lot of polarization, a lot of people in historically marginalized communities are frustrated, scared, tired. Um, so check in. How are you doing? How are you doing? 4 words.
Yeah,
And in the
yeah,
world of automation, that's what people remember most. And one last thing, Jen, send handwritten notes. They are not obsolete.
yes. I can't tell you the number of times we send a handwritten note and get the most beautiful emails or text messages or calls back from people because it is such a rarity.
I think about it every day, how much I miss getting handwritten notes from people. And every one I get, I can tell you because they are so impactful. And before we end, just really quick story. My husband and I went to the wedding of a former employee of ours. She was an intern. The card she and her husband wrote to us, 2-sided note card, was so personable and so meaningful that it brought me to tears. And I will save that forever.
Mm,
And it's
yeah.
just, it's Just call it the Furia Rubel way.
I love that. So, thank you so much to our listeners for joining us today. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or colleague, subscribe to the show, leave a review, and continue to send us your topic ideas and your feedback at onrecordpodcast@onrecordpr.com. We do read them all and do our best to touch on every topic that people recommend. Thank you again for joining us, and we will see you next week.
Ciao.
On Record PR is produced by Jennifer Simpson Carr and Matt Henderson, with support from the team at Furia Rubel Communications. This episode is edited by Isabel Horan and Christian Yamula. Visit www.onrecordpr.com for resources and more information.